Welcome to Georgia Highlands College Math 97 and Math 99 video tutorials. In this video segment, we'll be answering the question, how do you factor a trinomial whose leading coefficient is not 1 using the grouping method, which is also called the AC method? So we're talking about a trinomial in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. The first step in this process is to multiply the leading coefficient a with the constant c. After you have that value, you ask yourself the question, what factors of that product AC add to make b, the coefficient of the middle term? After you have that answer, you rewrite your bx term as a sum or difference using the factors that you found in the question above. And finally, you finish this off with factor by grouping, and then check through multiplication. Let's take a look at an example. So we have the example here of 8x squared minus 10x plus 3. And as you can see, our leading coefficient is not 1. So we can't use the old method that we were talking about. So for this method, the first step in this process is to multiply a times c. And in this case, a is 8 and c is 3. So when I multiply 8 times 3, I get 24. Now that I have that product, I need to ask myself, what are the factors of 24 that add to make b, which in this case is negative 10. So I set up my factor TP again, and you start going through your factor pairs for 24. And just looking at this problem and thinking about it, I know that I'm going to need both of my factors to be negative because they've got to multiply to make a positive number, but add to make a negative. So in thinking about these factors, I came up with negative 6 and negative 4. When I multiply negative 6 and negative 4, I get positive 24. And when I add them, I get negative 10. So the next step in this process has us rewriting the middle term of our original polynomial using the negative 6 and the negative 4 that we just found. So this is what it looks like. We write 8x squared just like in the original polynomial. But instead of writing negative 10x, I write negative 6x and negative 4x. And then I add the 3 onto the end. Now note, negative 6x and negative 4x when combined is negative 10x. However, we've turned this trinomial into a 4-termed polynomial. So bells and whistles should be going off in your head right now. Oop, I see 4 terms, so I need to use factor by grouping to finish this off. So we're pulling in an old method of factoring to complete this present method of AC. So we're going to factor by grouping by grouping the first 2 terms with common factors together and grouping our second 2 terms together. Then we have to go through the process of taking the GCF out of both groups. So with the first group, 8x squared and negative 6x, they have a common factor of 2x. And when we divide that factor 2x out of each of those terms, we get 4x and a negative 3. Moving on to the second set of parentheses, we have a negative leading term there. Now we've already got the 4x and the 3 that we need to match up our binomial factors there. so that we have that common binomial factor of 4x minus 3 in both the first and the second term. But we need to factor out that negative 1. So in this case, I'm going to factor out a negative 1, which changes the sign of both of the terms on the inside. So now you can see that we have that common binomial factor in both of the terms. That becomes our new greatest common factor, and we pull that out front to give us a factor of 4x minus 3. And when we divide 4x minus 3 out of both of those terms, we're left over with 2x minus 1. So 8x squared minus 10x plus 3 factors as 4x minus 3 times 2x minus 1, and we can check that with multiplication. And we just distribute each term in the first to each term in the second binomial. 4x times 2x is 8x squared. 4x times negative 1 is negative 4x. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. And negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. After we combine our like terms, we get 8x squared minus 10x. Got to put it together. We'll just do a little scratch there. Negative 10x plus 3. And we can see that we ended up with the same thing we began with. So the factored form, sure enough, is 4x minus 3 times 2x minus 1. I hope this has been a helpful method for you. It's an alternative to trial and error called the AC method, which involves using the method of grouping to factor trinomials whose leading coefficient is not 1. If you have any other questions about this method, please contact your Highlands instructor.